talking about some issues on the 10 Commandments of Black economic power. And from what Chanel mentioned to me, we had finished off on number 5. We were working on this book. You guys, in case you don't have a copy of the book, if you didn't get one at the event or something like that, you can go to Amazon and pick up a copy, or you can go to boycewatkins.com and pick up a copy. I also have, now that I mentioned this, I have a study guide with these slides, but actually scratch that. The slides are yours. The study guide has a fee, but it's yours. You can have it for free because that's what we're actually covering in this class. And if you don't know how to get it, Chanel can tell you where to find it. And then what else? What was the other thing too? One thing that my wife and I, in case you didn't know, my wife is a therapist. She's a licensed therapist and a full professor of social work, and she created a workbook on basically how to diagnose and solve financial anxiety. And she laid out the symptoms and financial anxiety symptoms, basically things that make you very nervous when it comes to money, things that might scare you financially, just keep you up at night, cold sweats, worried, stressed out, don't want to take any chances because you've had some financial trauma perhaps as a kid. I'm looking for something. And so anyway, with this workbook, I'm going to put this in the chat if you guys want to go take a look at that. I think the cost of it is $39. And I think that if you use the code word, all one word, no more anxiety, you can actually get it for $15. So there's the link right there. If you want to go take a look at the financial anxiety workbook, it's right there. So Chanel, if you could keep that link, just share it for anybody who asks for it. That might be something that could help you. So it drops the price from $39 to $15. Aisha says, I just got the workbook with the very nice. I hope, give us some feedback. Let us know what you think. We have been brainstorming a lot on the psychological barriers that keep us from building wealth. And one of the things I've really become intrigued with is digging deeper into financial psychology and really helping us to understand that, that families that are wealthy and people that are wealthy don't think like everybody else. One of the biggest wealth killers that is out there is mindset, just a toxic, negative mindset. And the problem is that a lot of people have been lied to and convinced that most wealth sort of just comes to you magically, that you're just lucky, somebody just, sorry. It's like somebody just, gave you a bunch of money and put you on top of the world. And that's just not based on the research I've done, the last 30 years. That's just not how wealth works. That's not what happens. And in case you're wondering why I'm looking around, I'm looking for one thing. Give me 1 second, guys. Hold on. I can't find what I was looking for. So I hope that we can agree. Give me a yes, at least if we can all agree that, that being Black does not block you from having success economically. Like give me a yes if we're all on the same page with that being Black might create some unique challenges. Being Black is not the same as being white. You're not white, right? That's one of the first things that I talk about extensively, is that you're not white. A lot of us think that we can apply the same rules as white people and get the same outcome. And I don't believe that. I believe that white people have a system that kind of works for certain white people. It doesn't even work for all white people, by the way. Wealth does not just accumulate magically in the hands of all white men. In fact, the group that's actually leading the nation right now in terms of suicides and drug addictions and everything else is actually white males, in a certain age bracket. And a lot of that's because they feel entitled to certain things because they're white males and they're not getting those things. So there are people, white and Black, that are being disenfranchised. But the thing is that when that barrier is put up in front of you, the country is free enough, in my view, that you have ways to get around that. And so my job, so think about what better way for you to understand how to get around a barrier or solve a problem than to consistently talk to someone like myself, who is literally an expert on that topic. Like, I'm literally a financial expert. I literally am a person who has spent 30 years diagnosing, detecting, undermining, sort of not undermining, but, reverse engineering economic systems my entire life. So it's like when I went to flight training today and I was getting on this airplane, learning how to fly, I learned how the plane works, and we go through, piece by piece, what every part of the engine does, exactly how to land the airplane and everything else. And eventually I'll be a better pilot because I'm learning from people who know their way around an airplane. So wealth is kind of like that airplane. The economic system is like that airplane. It has systems and components and engines and pistons and everything that an airplane might have. And the propellers, the thing that thrusts it forward and the thing that sinks it, the things that makes it go up, the things that make it tilt and twist and bend and everything else. And if you learn those systems, then you can figure out how to get where you want to get to. You understand? So what I want to do is help you build an economic airplane that's going to get you to the altitude you want to get to, help you thrust to the distance that you want to get to, and help you arrive accurately at your destination. Was that a good airplane analogy? What do y'all think? What do y'all think about that analogy? I like analogies. I think analogies work. And airplanes are on my mind because I did go to flight training today. And I was really worried because I was, when I was puking this morning, I was like, oh my God, if I get on this airplane, it's not going to go well. But I did it anyway, and everything went great. And I'm well on my way to becoming a pilot. And I'm really excited because I get to fly and go see my mama. And that's my number one motivation right now, is to be there for my mama. Our family's just working through some stuff. It's just life. That's what it is. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll talk a little bit about some issues when you talk about relationships. Remember last time in the book, The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power, we talked about investing heavily in relationships, and that this was one of the keys to wealth, that literally, having good relationships is incredibly important. I read a story about one of the Rockefellers, and literally this guy, I don't remember which Rockefeller it was, but this Rockefeller, literally his whole entire life, all he did was in the 1930s and 40s is he kept these index cards with people's personal information so he could build relationships with them. I kid you not. He would write down, stuff, details about their life, the names of their kids, their profession, their likes, their dislikes, conversations they had. And he literally built this database up to thousands and thousands of people. And he said that this database of relationships was literally his greatest asset that he ever had. He said, this was the thing that made me millions and millions of dollars, was maintaining these relationships. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper than that and say that it's not just those types of relationships. It's really all types of relationships. Basically, healthy relationships are critical when you talk about trying to be successful. A lot of people don't understand that the number one killer of Black wealth right now in America is bad families and bad relationships. And also when you have these bad relationships, and this disconnection with each other, it creates these scenarios where individuals traumatize each other. In Chicago, for example, this week there was a Black police officer who got killed on her doorstep by two Black boys. I don't know if anybody heard about that, but they don't talk about it because I guess it doesn't fit a narrative. It doesn't fit the whole racial narrative that they push in media. But this Black woman got murdered on her doorstep by three young Black boys between the ages of 16 and 20. And when they asked the three Black boys, why did you kill this police officer? Did you know her? They said no. They said, did she do anything to you? They said no. Why did you kill her? You know what they said? They said, well, we were just bored. They literally said we were just bored. And so effectively what I saw with that, there's a lot of that you can unpack with that terrible situation. But what I see with that, number one, is I see trauma, right? I see Black people and Black women becoming more and more afraid of Black men because there are Black men out there that'll do things like that to you. I heard the other Black people around me sort of talking about the youth and saying, basically saying, we need to start incarcerating more and more of these kids because this is crazy, which is terrible, right? Because it almost gets to the point where we're supporting mass incarceration again, because nobody wants to believe that you can just literally be a young woman who just finished a master's degree, who has her whole life ahead of her, walk out on your front porch and have the young Black men come and murder you. Like, that's just got to be a horrible nightmare. That's worse than being killed by Klansmen, because these are the people that we're supposed to be supporting and protecting you. So effectively, that trauma creates all kinds of weird dynamics that undermine our ability to relate to one another. And then when you talk about relationships, you have to sort of ask yourself what it was going on with those young boys, that they didn't have adults in their lives that helped them understand that this is incredibly off code. You don't even think about doing something like that. You wouldn't even think about hurting a Black woman. Like, what is wrong with you, right? Well, that tells me that I bet you that if you look in their families, you're going to see jacked up, insane scenarios as far as relationships go. Daddy's not there, mama's on drugs, maybe they're getting beat every day, whatever, right? Because this sort of behavior is created in America. It's created, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to destroy a child. So the village destroyed these kids and made them into liabilities for the Black community. All the potential, all the wealth that could be built by these individuals working together is not going to occur because they're killing each other, literally. Like, so that's an extreme example. And I didn't mean to make you sad with that example, but when I think about that, I think about the fact that there is no way on earth you can ever possibly imagine trying to build sustainable institutions or large amounts of economic or political or social power in an environment where a young Black woman that literally can't walk out her front door without wondering if some young Black boy is going to kill her. There's already so many other things that are stacked against her. So the opposite extreme of that is when everybody's working together, when these young boys are raised to see their potential, when they want to be successful, they want to be educated, they want to be millionaires, they want to support Black women, they want to love and protect them, they want to do what's best for the family, they want to pour into the family. So they're doing what we talk about in the book. In the 10 Commandments of Economic Power, we talk about how to raise the opposite of whatever was raised in this particular situation. They pretty much raised three black boys that are going to be in prison for the next 50 years. I'd like to raise 3 Black boys or a million Black boys that are going to be millionaires in the next 10 years. That's possible. That's doable. The same energy, the same fearlessness, the same assertiveness that it takes to go out and kill somebody, right? Kill a cop. I mean, you got to be pretty brave to walk up on a police officer and kill a cop. That same energy could be applied to going and becoming a multimillionaire by the age of 20. That same energy could be applied to becoming anything that you want in life. I mean, really, that's what's required. Anything I've ever accomplished in my life came from me being very smart, and I'm pretty fearless of almost anything. Because I understand psychology well. I know how to talk myself out of fear. Fear does not slow me down because I know everybody messes up, so I'm not scared. That's why I'm able to go far in certain areas, right? So my point is to say, and I don't even know if this is the right example to really use, and I hope it didn't upset anybody, but I really think it's important to kind of look at that. And I think that the thing we can pick up from that kind of example is that just shows the extremes of how difficult it is to build wealth in certain environments. You cannot build wealth in environments where things like this are happening and the whole country isn't outraged. Like, the whole community should be outraged about this. The whole Black community should be going crazy about this. But we're not, because we're waiting for the next George Floyd, because that's where CNN is going to give us permission to be upset. And then we're going to be upset about that. But we're not upset about this Black woman that was killed by 3 young Black boys and really investigating this. Like, for example, I'm flying airplanes now. We talk about that, right? Whenever there's an airplane crash, let me tell you what the FAA does. The FAA makes sure they maintain the aviation community. The FAA make sure that there are pretty much almost virtually no plane crashes in the United States on any given day. They happen every now and then for sure, but you rarely hear of any major airlines crashing in the United States. Well, why is that? Well, because they keep everything on code. Do you understand that? I can show you a book. Hold on, let me show you. Let me see if I got one around. I don't have my book that I can find. Here we go. Here we go. Let me show you. Now, the code I gave you guys is called the 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power, right? This book is, which is on Amazon, by the way, and it's about 183 pages. This is the code that I've laid out for you and your family to keep you focused and to achieve your goals. The FAA's code looks like this. It is literally hundreds, if not thousands of pages of extremely detailed information on how to manage an airplane, how to handle every emergency, where you can fly, who can fly, all the different ways you can get your license revoked. If you're on an airplane and you are even anywhere close to the illegal alcohol limit, the legal alcohol limit to fly a plane is about 1/3 of what it is to drive a car. And if anybody is even on your plane drunk, you can lose your license just for having the drunk passenger on your plane. So the point is that they keep everything on code. That's how they keep the crashes from occurring. And then when there is a crash, they investigate. When there's an incursion, they investigate. If I go fly into O'Hare's airspace by accident, they're going to call me and they're going to say, what were you doing in O'Hare's space? You could have hit a jumbo jet. Your license is suspended, or this is a big problem, right? So effectively, the way they keep the air safe is they have codes of conduct, codes of behavior. And then when there is a crash, when there is an incursion, they dig deep. They do a deep dive analysis to figure out what happened here, what went wrong here, which system was violated, who did what, right? So they can make sure it never happens again. So I personally believe, this is where I'm going with this. I believe that in your family, when it comes to anything you want to accomplish as a family, as a unit, particularly let's talk about economics right now, but economics spins into everything else. Most Black misery, most Black unhappiness, most Black stress, most Black drama, most Black chaos occurs because of a lack of economic resources. So when there is a disaster, I believe you need to investigate. When Whitney Houston died from a drug overdose, I didn't see a lot. I saw a whole lot of people getting online saying prayers up for Whitney. Oh, this is so tragic. We're going to miss you. Greatest singer ever. All that's fine. But after that, I'm looking for the intelligent Black people should be the ones doing the forensic analysis, saying, how did this beautiful, young, talented woman who could have been a billionaire end up dying of a drug overdose in a bathtub? What went wrong? What can we learn from this incident? What can we learn from this airplane crash? She's soaring like an eagle. Her plane was headed to 30,000 feet altitude, flying higher than anybody else. And the plane crashed in a big bloody mess where everybody died. What happened? And I'm going to tell you, I don't think you're encouraged to do the forensics because there is an explanation. It goes back to all the enablers that were in her life. It goes back to maybe trauma she experienced. Maybe it goes back to the weirdness of Hollywood culture and how they encourage drugs and all this other stuff, right? So ultimately, if you don't do that, if you're not trained to think that way, then you're going to be stuck in this crazy purgatory that you'll never get out of. My favorite show right now on Amazon Prime is a show called From. And From is a show where you get to this town, and it's a podunk little town, and you think you're lost, and you try to leave the town. And when you try to leave the town, you drive down the road, you're looking for your way out, and then you end up driving in a circle. And then you keep going, you say, okay, I must have missed the exit. You drive again, and then you drive in another circle, and another circle. And then you realize you're stuck. You're stuck there. And basically, my wife, when I told her about that, she said, "Oh yeah, lots of movies are like that. There are lots of movies. Anybody remember that Marlon Wayans had a movie like that, where he kept living the same day over and over and over again. Every day he woke up, it was his wedding day, over and over. Anybody remember that movie? Or Bill Murray did a Groundhog Day, right? Where sheesh, hold on, let me turn this off. Okay, somebody is literally trying to call me on Facebook right now, and I'm gonna have to tell them not to call me. There we go. All right. Sorry about that. But there was a Bill Murray movie called Groundhog Day. Same thing. He kept living the same day over and over and over again. Well, my wife explains. Remember, my wife is an expert on the subconscious mind, and one of the things that she said is that movies like that basically make one simple point. They make the point that that if you don't learn your lesson, then you're going to continuously confront that same lesson over and over and over and over and over again. That if you don't learn your lesson, if you constantly ignore the lesson and never confront the issue, you're going to live in that same little purgatory and just go in circles forever. So some of us get stuck in that. Some of us get stuck in sort of doing the same thing over and over again and failing repeatedly. So intelligent Black people, in my view, are people who are not going to do that. So just so I can move on, just give me a yes that all that yapping I just did is worthwhile and that you're not going to do that you're going to actually grow, evolve, learn, and do the forensics so that you can be in a position where your family's actually going to win. Just give me a yes so we can move on. All right. So basically, so when you talk about wealth, as we mentioned before, we know relationships matter, right? We know that that if you don't have the right relationships, it's very difficult to build wealth. If your relationships drain you or are toxic in major ways, that can affect your ability to create almost anything because you're constantly distracted. Maybe you're fighting with somebody. Maybe you're dealing with people that are trying to take away from you. Maybe you're getting negative energy, right? So all these things happen. And so the cure for wealth loss due to unhealthy relationships is this. Let me give you guys a solution that I put in the book. All right. So let me see. I'm trying to figure out which one I should be clicking on. Okay. Let's try that. All right. So here's the solution for wealth loss due to unhealthy relationships. Let me move forward here on this slide. All right. Number one is therapy. Therapy does a lot because therapy helps you overcome childhood trauma. And if you haven't gotten therapy yet, I encourage you to do it, even if you're healthy. The stigma of therapy has to go away. It's absolutely terrible. My wife is a therapist, so her website is coachingwithdralicia.com. If you're interested, feel free to reach out to her. She has some clients. She might have some space. It's coachingwithdralicia.com. Number two, relationship counseling. I believe that relationship counseling shouldn't just happen for couples. Relationship counseling should be with anybody that you need to get along with. Anybody that you want to get along with. If you have a cousin that you're making good money with, then you want to have some sort of intervention process to help you minimize disputes. Does anybody remember the movie Soul Food? How many of y'all remember the movie Soul Food from the 90s? Give me a guess if you remember the movie Soul Food. And in the movie Soul Food, there was all the kids, and then there was Big Mama. Big Mama dies in the middle of the movie. Anybody remember that? What happened when Big Mama died? Anybody remember what happened when Big Mama died? When Big Mama died, all hell broke loose. Everything fell apart. The whole family was in shambles. Everybody was fighting. And that's because when Big Mama died, there was a vacuum of leadership. And the vacuum of leadership meant that there was no process in place. There was no judge and jury to resolve disputes. So effectively, you had war and feudalism. This is what happened in Europe when the Black Plague hit. When the Black Plague hit Europe, Europe went from having central governments to being very tribal. And that's when they went back to almost caveman status. They would just form little tribes and groups, and they would fight, beat each other up, and take each other's stuff. And because there was no intermediary to kind of resolve those issues. So anybody that you want to get along with, like if you get together and create some group of individuals that allow where you're actually able to make that money, right? You finally get that business idea where you can all quit your jobs and start making money. Then you need to protect that relationship like it's gold. Put your ego in your pocket. Stop thinking that you are the center of the universe or that you have to fight over any little issue. Your goal should be to work together to avoid the dispute, not to dominate the other person that you think is the problem, because that's going to ruin everything. Even in marriage, they talk, number one, one of the biggest wealth killers in America is divorce. Divorce and baby mama-ism, baby daddy-ism. Baby mama-ism, baby daddy-ism is the easiest way to go broke. If you ever want to be poor, just have a bunch of kids with crappy fathers, or have a bunch of babies with a bunch of women. That's a great way to go to be poor, or go get a divorce. Divorce will eat through all your wealth because basically the lawyers and everybody gets all your money. And then also this person you should be building with, you're not building with them. You're spending all your time fighting with them. So you don't even have the energy to go build anything on your own because you're too drained and tired. Anybody been through like a really horrible relationship and just know how crappy it feels like every day, how drained you are when you're constantly fighting with the person that's supposed to be your teammate? It's horrible. It's really hard. And I'm going to tell you, this is where stuff like therapy can really be helpful, right? Sometimes you just have somebody that's just trifling, somebody stupid that just doesn't want to grow, doesn't want to evolve, that wants to fight all the time. And they're not really fighting you. They're really fighting themselves. That's what I figured that out about crazy people. Who knows? Maybe I'm one of them sometimes. I don't know. But crazy people are usually not fighting you. They're fighting themselves. So my goal is to either get away from you. So you just be over there shadow boxing. You just be over fighting with yourself. You're not going to be fighting. I'm not going to fight with you. Period. I'm not going to do it. Why? Well, because me fighting with you takes energy. It drains me. Even when I do stuff online all the time. You guys, I have several 100,000 followers and all that. I ain't fighting with nobody. People try to pick fights with me all the time. And I'm like, I am not going to do it because I've only got this much energy and I'm going to use it all to achieve the number one goal in my life, which is to make B1 people the most economically intelligent group of people on the planet. I ain't got time to sit around and argue with you over he said, she said, or what. I'm just not doing it. So ultimately, you have to do that. If you can't do that, things like therapy can be really beneficial tools. There's a saying that says that a lot of people get therapy to deal with the people in their family who won't get therapy. They get therapy because they got relatives who don't think they need therapy, who think that they're fine. And you got to find a way to cope with this crazy idiot who thinks that their shit doesn't stink. Excuse my French. I'm not going to cuss anymore. I promise. I apologize for that. But seriously, you got this person around you that really thinks they're never wrong. They don't apologize and they destroy everything and they're horrible to be around and they refuse to get any help. They won't even sit down with a counselor with you. And you're the one sitting there in therapy talking about how do I deal with this person? Well, there are tools to do that. So it's almost like risk management. They basically say there's like 3 ways to deal with risk or deal with a threat. You can either assume the risk, either take the risk on, you could manage the risk, or you could avoid the risk, right? So maybe with this person, you can either internalize it, take it on, and confront them and deal with them or whatever, and use some tools to manage them or whatever, or just let them kind of just do whatever they want to do, or you avoid them if possible. But maybe the best solution, actually, Ben Franklin had a great phrase that I really like where he said that 1 minute of preparation prevents like an hour of work later on. That literally 1 minute of kind of like preventive maintenance, like sort of thinking carefully about the types of people that you even let into your space, can really save you a lot of grief later on when you're trying to deal with the wrong people that you did allow into your space, right? That might include even people you allow into your bed, all that. So when you find people who really want to also work together and get along, who want to maintain the peace, then you can maybe get a mediator. Like I know business people that have investment clubs and they have a therapist for the group just to make sure that the group gets along, that everybody feels heard, that there are no problems. That's an unconventional technique that I don't see talked about a lot, but I think that's a great way to run a business. Invest that money and have somebody just sit down with the team, help the team members kind of talk to each other. Companies do this sometimes. Sometimes they'll have retreats and they'll have a therapist there to help them figure out each other's personality types and stuff. With my team, I had them all take a personality test so that I could get to know them better in terms of understanding how they think, so that I can learn how to show up better for them. Okay, so all these things can make a big difference in terms of success. And I'll give you a real life example of where broken relationships can become very costly. If you're a sports fan, you remember when the Dallas Cowboys used to dominate professional football in the early 1990s, because of the head coach and the owner, Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. They could win Super Bowls like nothing. They just won Super Bowl every year. Well, their egos got in the way, and they started to fight, and then the relationship parted. Each of them went their own separate ways. Neither one of them ever won a Super Bowl again. Another example, the Chicago Bulls had a period where they could not avoid winning championships. They had Michael Jordan. They had a perfect team around him. They had a great coach, Phil Jackson. They had a great organization that was really doing what they had to do to keep the team together at that time, at least up until 98. They were winning championships every year, breaking records every year, couldn't stop winning. And then for some reason, they just decided to break the team up. Well, when they broke the team up, the Bulls have been mediocre ever since. Another example, I'm just going into sports because I was watching that Celtics game last night. You had the New England Patriots, same thing. They had Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, winning combination, won a bunch of Super Bowls. Belichick and Brady parted ways. I think Brady did win a Super Bowl. The Patriots haven't done anything close to that since that time. Another example, last night I saw the Boston Celtics lose a very big game against the Miami Heat, and they shouldn't have lost. They were number 2 seed. They were supposed to be in the championship, but for whatever reason, they just played like crap the first 3 games, and then they played great the next 3, and then they lost the last game. And the last game, they looked absolutely terrible. And it made me think about a year ago when they had this other black coach named Ime Udoka, and they chose to part ways with him, I guess, because he was doing something terrible. I think he was having sex or something, which I don't know why that's a crime now. I don't understand that, to be honest with you. And I wonder if there's a regret to say, gosh, we thought we could just recreate the magic because Ime took us to the championship. Well, maybe Ime was the right coach for those guys to get the most out of those players. So ultimately, when you're talking about your business and you're talking about your partnerships and people that you work with, I encourage you to just remember, when you get that winning combination, don't take it for granted. Because winning really is a drug. Success is a drug. Money is a drug. And the thing about about any type of drug that gives you that dopamine injection or gives you that high, it affects you kind of like the way cocaine or alcohol affects you. It gives you a false sense of confidence. It makes you think that you're wonderful, amazing, that success follows you everywhere you go. Everything you touch turns to gold, and then you end up failing. A good example is actually the group New Edition. You might have heard me talk about them, but New Edition was a group that was doing extremely well in the 80s. And then Bobby Brown wanted to be bigger than the group, so he left and went solo. He did very well solo for a little while, and then he kind of fell off. And then Ralph Transvant went solo, and then Johnny Gill went solo. And then the Belle Biv DeVoe guys, I guess, they just said, okay, let's get together. Here's what's interesting. I'm going to be honest with you, and I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings when I say this, because one of the members of New Edition is actually in the Black Business School, and he's a very good guy, very smart guy. He comes to stock market class on Tuesdays, and I respect him immensely. But I have to admit that when I watch New Edition, and come on, tell me if you agree, Johnny, Ralph, and Bobby were the 3 guys that probably they could go solo. The other 3, I don't think they could go solo. I don't think those 3 guys had what it took. The tall one, I think, is Robbie and Mike and Ricky. I don't remember all their names, but I get the names mixed up. But you know what I'm talking about, right? But let me tell you what happened with Mike, Ronnie, and I think it was Ricky. Mike, Ronnie, and Ricky did something that I thought was really powerful, just in terms of literally fitting into the paradigm of what I teach in this book. So Michael Bivins, who I met Michael Bivins. I interviewed him in 2009. I immediately picked up from him that he was the leader that he was kind of a little bit of the leader of the group, that he was the go-getter, he was the visionary in certain ways. Not that the other guys didn't have vision, but there was something about him where he was just, he had that energy where he was just sort of able to sort of see things and put things together and make things happen. And that made sense to me. I said, I get it now. So these three guys said, well, gosh, everybody's going solo. We don't have a group anymore. So let's pull our resources together and form this group called Bell Biv DeVoe. And if you remember, they had a lot of hits. And I'm going to just tell you, honestly, I don't even know if those guys can really sing that well. I hope that they're not mad that I say this, because I know one of the guys in the group and I don't want to be mean, but I think they might agree that, in terms of talent, I don't think they can match Ralph and Bobby and Johnny Gill, but I argue they had more success than all of them, except maybe Bobby. Maybe Bobby had a little more, but even Bobby kind of, his playing kind of went downhill. So now what do you see, 40 years later? You see New Edition at the age of 50, making $10 million a year, performing around the world, filling up concert venues all around the planet. I think that's beautiful because now they get to be like the Rolling Stones. They get to grow old together and become extremely successful. And I compare that to a group like the Ghetto Boys, who could probably be doing the same thing because they got a big market. There's a multi-billion-dollar market for oldies concerts. And one of the members of the Ghetto Boys, Willie D, is a very good friend of mine. He was in my wedding. We're that close. And Willie was kind of what Michael was for New Edition. Willie was the mastermind behind the Ghetto Boys. He was the smart one. He's the one that sort of helped everybody see their talent and whatever. And this group was amazing. But unfortunately, they didn't have that same path, the ability to kind of work together as a collective. And I don't think it was Willie's fault, but then again, I don't know. I'm not judging their situation, but now there's no ability to kind of monetize that brand. And I could keep going down the list. I could talk about Death Row Records. I could talk about all kinds of multi-billion-dollar brands that can't be monetized, mainly because certain people connected with the brand are just not able to get along. Right? I don't want to talk to him no more. I don't care. I don't care how much money I lose. Right? So I want you to grow beyond that. I want you to at least be able to have the skill set to identify when that is happening, because what happens is that with that old saying about, divide and conquer. Well, when they divide up the village, it's much easier to conquer a divided village than it is to conquer an undivided village. Like literally, when you see unity, you can't really dominate a unified group the way you can dominate a group where they're infighting with each other. And then what happens is that when Black families start to infight, everybody gets sold into slavery. Everybody ends up being sold into corporate slavery. Every person is a solo individual in a competitive economic system. You've got to pay rent. You've got to pay bills. So what do? Well, you say, hey, Mr. White Man, can you give me a job? Next thing you know, you're miserable. Why? Well, because you're getting up every day, working for a wage that is worth far less than what you're worth, and you're being mistreated every day, and you're not even able to really build wealth from that amount of money that they're giving you, and you're miserable. Why? Well, because you don't have a group to turn to, right? If you had a group to turn to, you would turn to that group, but you don't. You're stuck by yourself. So just understand that, when I talk about economics being gang affiliated, I need y'all to understand this, that there's rarely such a thing as somebody just kind of doing everything by themselves. Elon Musk is worth all these billions of dollars, but Elon Musk has 1 million soldiers behind him. He has 1 million engineers that are running SpaceX and Tesla and doing all these amazing things, building his robots and all that. He's just the face of this massive organization. All right, so let me move to the next slide here so we can kind of continue our progress, because I know I got stuck on that point for a little bit, but I really wanted to make it. All right, so the next point, sorry, excuse me, is I'm having trouble talking because I was a little sick earlier today, and my voice is a little hoarse. All right, so here's what I want you to know next. All right, so moving on. So we talked about the cure for unhealthy wealth loss due to unhealthy relationships. We talked about things like therapy, relationship counseling, reciprocity in your networking strategies. Don't network with people and ask them what they can do for you. Start off by asking what you can do for them. Also forgiveness. I think forgiveness and not making assumptions goes a long way. I think there's a book called The Four Agreements or something. And one of the things that they said is don't make assumptions. When you think someone doesn't like you, find out if they don't like you, but don't just assume they don't like you or take their actions and run or sort of run with it. A lot of disputes are built off of misunderstandings. Also, I just found forgiveness is a great, powerful tool that really takes weight off of you. So I'm a big believer in forgiveness. I've had to forgive a lot of things in my life, and hopefully, and I've had to have people forgive me. Maybe I've hurt some people, and I apologize to them. But forgiveness, I think, it's not for you. It's not for the other person. It's really for you. All right. So leaders versus bosses. One of the things I want to talk about with leaders versus bosses is that you got to understand that bosses tend to be mean and cruel. Bosses demean others to make them feel better about themselves. Leaders understand that leadership is service. Leaders make other people better. And so ultimately, when you're talking about running your business, I want you to run your business as a leader and not a boss, or run your family as a leader and not a boss. There's not much else to say there. Now, here's the curse of the solopreneur. 95% of all Black businesses have no employees. 95% of all Black-owned businesses have 0 employees. The solopreneur basically has achieved one goal. And that goal is they bought themselves out of a job. They bought their freedom. And that's important. You got to buy your freedom. But the problem is that as a solopreneur, a couple things happen that make it difficult for you to really fulfill your potential. One is you hit a bottleneck. Time is a limited resource. None of us gets more than 168 hours a week or 24 hours a day to live our lives. We all get 8,760 hours a year to be human and to be alive and to work on things. And even then, you're sleeping about a third of that time. When you don't have that ability, when you haven't developed that trust and that ability to delegate or to form systems and teams to get things done, then you're going to find yourself constantly frustrated, because even if God could literally dump $1 billion opportunity on you, he could literally put $1 billion opportunity right in front of you. And if you don't have the team orientation or the ability to build a team to fulfill and properly monetize that $1 billion opportunity, you're going to turn that $1 billion opportunity into a $200,000 opportunity. You're literally going to take you're going to take a feast fit for an entire village and you're going to turn it into a happy meal. So ultimately, that solopreneurship, that goes back to some of the key principles we teach in the Black Business School. Remember, in the Black Business School, in our Black Business School for Kids, which, by the way, the URL is blackmillionairesoftomorrow.com, blackmillionairesoftomorrow.com. So feel free to go there if you want to get your kids started. It's blackmillionairesoftomorrow.com. One of the things that we teach the kids is what we call the POISE model. Which tells them what they want to be when they grow up. That's in POISE is POISE. It stands for Producer, Owner, Investor, Saver, Entrepreneur. Producer, Owner, Investor, Saver, Entrepreneur. People who do 2 or 3 of these 5 things tend to be wealthy in this country. Producer, Owner, Investor, Saver, Entrepreneur. So entrepreneurs tend to do better than employees. Savers tend to do better than spenders. Producers tend to do better than consumers. Owners tend to have most of the power. Investors do well because investors believe in delayed gratification. So that's the first model. The second model we created in the Black Business School that we believe your children should learn is what we call the sturdy model. We want to build sturdy children. Sturdy is spelled STERDY. It's not STU, it's STERDY. And the sturdy model stands for things we want kids to learn, which is the S stands for systems. I want kids to learn systems, how to make money with a system, not just with labor. Learning how to make money with labor is something that you were raised with because that's all anybody around you knew. But actually, when you study wealth the way I have, you understand that most people that make a lot of money, they make their money through systems, because systems can work even when you're sleeping. I want you to learn how to make money without working. In fact, that should be a B1 motto. We want to make our money without working. Like, you work so you can get to the point where you're not working anymore. It's like when you're pedaling your bike, you're pedaling downhill. So you pedal hard in the beginning so that eventually you get enough momentum and you are able to just coast without pedaling anymore, right? Well, how do you do that? Well, first of all, you got to pedal in the beginning to kind of get things going, and then you got to make sure you're going downhill and not going uphill. You got to make sure you're on full tires and not flat tires. Maybe you have the wind at your back and not at your front. If the wind is at your back and you're going downhill and you have full tires, then you pedal early, and then at some point you're moving faster than everybody else and you're not pedaling at all. But if you are not smart and you don't carefully select the route you take, and you're going uphill instead of downhill, downhill, well, you're going to be pedaling your whole entire life. So economically speaking, they train you at an early age to go uphill instead of downhill. So you're pedaling your whole life. You're working yourself into the ground. You're working your fingers to the bone, and you're working until you die. And then you wonder why you're not getting ahead. Well, because somebody gave you the wrong path. They sent you uphill when wealthy people tend to be going downhill. Also, they didn't send you out with full tires. They sent you with flat tires. They didn't put you in the world with an inheritance and a bunch of wealth creating ability. They sent you into the world with no assets, no knowledge, no connections, no relationships, a bunch of trauma, a bunch of debt, and a bunch of misery, and then expected you to somehow pedal that bike down the street and go 3,000 miles like everybody else. You can't do it. It's hard to do. And then on top of that, the wind is already kind of against you because you're black. Well, you could just turn and face the other direction where the wind is at your back. When I was working at Syracuse, and I remember I had a PhD, I was very highly educated. I was hot stuff. I was the only black person on the planet to get a PhD in finance that year, by the way. No other African-American on earth that I know of, male or female, got a PhD in finance in 2002. And that was a big deal. I got great jobs because of that, because I was very rare. I thought I was on top. I thought that I was ready to go and conquer the world. But then I realized racism meets you at the top of the mountain, just like it meets you at the bottom. Barack Obama was the president, and he had more racism on his job than almost any of you have ever had on your job. So effectively, that doesn't go away. But what I learned was, I said, okay, I'm riding my bike, and I'm in the wind. The wind is blowing in my face, and this wind of racism is a heavy wind. But then I realized, wait, maybe if I turn my bike around and gain the courage to go in the other direction, I can have the wind at my back instead of at my front. So instead of working in environments where I was tolerated, I specifically and intentionally sought out environments where I was loved and appreciated. Instead of being around people that didn't like me, I wanted to be around people who did. Instead of being around people who don't understand me, I wanted to be around people who do, right? So the same things that you all love about me, and I appreciate those of you that love me, I love you too. The same things you love about me are the things they hated about me, right? So ultimately, but this is fundamentally true in general in life, right? You have somebody that's really violent, and a violent person that wants to kill people, that sounds terrible, right? Well, if you're a violent killer, then you probably shouldn't be like a priest or you shouldn't run a daycare, right? But if you want to be a killer, go join the military. They will give you medals and awards for being able to kill people, right? Just don't kill your own teammates, but they put you on the battlefield, you kill a bunch of people, they'll reward you for that. Or, so the point is, that really, I think that wealth building process is the same way. You think of that bike analogy. If you have full tires and you're going downhill and the wind is at your back, you're going to go a whole lot further than a person who's riding on flat tires going uphill where the wind is in their face. And so you don't let other people tell you which direction to ride your bike. And also, you got to fill up those tires for those kids. You got to invest for those kids. Your kid, no B1 child in the year 2070 should be born without an inheritance. Every single one of those children should go into the world with a running start because they have a grandparent way back in the year 2023 who was doing little things like the $5 a day investing plan, which over a 40, 50-year period grows into well over $1 million. And they're coming in, full speed, ready to go. Path laid out. They understand the whole system. They understand the whole track. Race car drivers who memorize the track do better than race car drivers who don't know the track at all, who don't have a good car, and who've never driven a car before. Do you follow what I'm saying? Do you get what I know? I like analogies, but I think that analogy works. All right. So here's the thing. The other thing too. So systems. I think people should learn to make money with systems before they make money with labor. The T stands for technology. Technology is king. You live in a world with AI, for God's sake. I mean, AI, internet, Google, all this makes technology the most beautiful resource in the world or the scariest thing in the world, depending on how you use it. So people who master technology have a far higher likelihood of becoming multimillionaires than people who don't. The E stands for entrepreneurship. Those who understand entrepreneurial skill tend to be economically secure long-term, because when they lose their job, they don't see that as losing a job. They see that as gaining free time that they can pour into their business so they can then find a way to make more money. Most entrepreneurs I know, most people who quit their job that I know who start a business and get some sort of support, guidance, and mentorship or join a group or whatever, they're usually happier 3 to 5 years later without a job than they were with a job. Most people I know that quit their job and walk away, they never go back. Okay. So the E stands for entrepreneurship. Every Black child should learn how to be an entrepreneur by the age of 12. They should also be own shares of stock by the time they're born. And they should also understand the importance of owning things like real estate. The D stands for delegation. If I can delegate my tasks to a team, which again requires me to do the work, right? We were talking about therapy earlier, and people are like, well, Dr. Boyce, why are you talking about therapy? Well, because it's hard to delegate if you are so traumatized that you can't trust anybody. A lot of people don't delegate because they can't trust anybody. I saw somebody that had a T-shirt that and it was like supposed to be a quote for all Black women, and literally the T-shirt said, "F it, I'll just do it myself." Anybody ever seen that T-shirt where it literally says like, "F it, I'll just do it myself"? Like, why is that? Well, because you feel maybe because of how you were raised or what you went through as a kid, that anytime you delegated something to somebody else, they failed. They didn't come through for you, right? That is traumatic. That's not fair. That shouldn't have happened to you. But what happens is that when you gain that like sort of rugged independence, and men, we do it too. I have it. That's one of my limitations, I'll admit, is that you kind of just get to the point where it's just hard to trust, to give stuff off to people. But what I learned is that in order for me to learn how to delegate, I had to do a couple things. One, I had to acknowledge the fact that everybody can't be trusted. So you've got to learn how to vet people properly, train them properly, make sure that you communicate clearly what your expectations are instead of just vaguely communicating the expectations and then being disappointed when they don't deliver for you. But then also, it required me to work through myself and get past the part of Boyce that was so angry and scared and everything, from the things that happened to me when people didn't come through for me, when I got screwed by somebody that I trusted or whatever. So that delegation, but the delegation thing, if you figure it out, is very, very powerful. I heard a billionaire explain how he got $1 billion. You know what he said? He said one thing that people think is that getting wealthy is about how hard you work. He said, it's not how hard you work. He said, it's how hard you get other people to work. So if you know how to motivate your team and pick the right team and train them properly and pay them adequately, they'll do more work as a team than you could ever do as an individual. So delegation is a skill. I believe it could literally be a whole class. Like if I was raising like the economic soldiers of the next generation, like an elite team of young Black people that are going to be the best entrepreneurs on earth, I would have a class like on how to delegate, how to run a team. That's what they do at schools like Harvard and Yale. When you're coming into wealth, that's one thing that they do. They'll teach them how to manage workers. They don't teach them how to go become one. Right. So, and then the Y, you can say the Y stands for youth if you want to. Somebody made that suggestion because I said the Y doesn't stand for anything. Let's say the Y stands for youth. So that's the sturdy model in the Black Business School. All right. So, by the way, some of you were asking about the book. Yeah, the book, if you go to my website, boycewatkins.com, you can get it there, or you can go to Amazon, the 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. That's what we're covering. And also, a reminder to everybody, the All Black National Convention is happening October 20th. So if you'd like to join us there, you can go to my website. I put everything on my website, but there's also allblacknationalconvention.com, either one. And we're going to do a lot of training. We're going to do a lot of networking, a lot of connecting, and we're just going to have a lot of fun. The convention's an absolute blast. And one other thing I wanted to mention to you, I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah. So Chanel's going to put the link in there for the financial anxiety workbook that my wife put together. So feel free to just click on the link if you'd like to get a copy of that book, if it'll help you sort of work through your process, because I find that financial anxiety can cause you to make bad economic decisions and kind of get stuck in certain places. And I don't want you to be stuck. All right. So ultimately we talked about the curse of the solopreneur. I don't want you to be a solopreneur. I want you to be an entrepreneur. And I eventually want your goal, if you run a business, your goal, or if you're invested in a business, your goal is to eventually scale where you're able to use the sturdy model and have systems and technology and delegation, which will allow you to make more money than you could ever make as an individual. Okay. All right. So let's keep going here. All right. So solutions, we already talked about solutions. So let's jump forward here. So one thing, so we talked about toxic relationships, so I'm not going to drill into that. So let's go into commandment number 6. Commandment number 6 is keeping it within the family whenever possible. So keeping it within the family whenever possible. What does that mean? Well, basically, it's really simple. It means that you should, when you are investing money or spending money, understand one important rule about money. Money is power, and money is power. Money is energy. Money is all those things. So when you are distributing your power, you have to decide very consciously who you want to have that power. Who is on my team and who isn't on my team. And so what I do when it comes to money and investing money or giving money away or whatever it is, or spending my money, I always sort of form a circle in my head. And the circle starts with like my wife and my kids. And then if I can't find some reason to make that investment in my wife and my kids, then I'll go a little bit wider in my circle. And then I'll look outside and I'll look at my friends. And then if I can't find my friends that I can invest in, then I'll go look a little wider and I'll find other B1 people. And if I can't find people in that space, then maybe I'll go beyond that, right? But you want to keep these sort of circles of wealth. And the reason you do it is not because you're this wonderful person who wants to just be supportive of everybody else. That might be who you are, but you don't have to be that person. Really, you do it also because you're into this thing called self-preservation. You don't do it because you're generous. You can even do it because you're selfish. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I'm taking care of people that I know are in the same game as me, right? They're B1 like me. They're on the same code as I am. They think the way I do. Then what does that mean? Well, that means that the law of reciprocity is going to kick in. That means that the same way I came through for you in a pinch financially, oh, you're going to come through for me when I'm in a pinch, right? This is how you create a circle of success or a circle of security. Right. This is what teammates do for each other. You pass each other the ball. And so ultimately, this is not something to do because you're trying to sort of uplift the whole Black community. This is something you do when you want to uplift yourself and uplift your family and uplift the people that are connected to you on some meaningful level. So wealth grows mathematically the same way flowers grow. Okay. Actually, remember, I was talking to you guys about the equations of wealth, and I was explaining that if you look at those mathematical equations, they're the same equations we get out of biology. We actually borrowed our financial equations from plants and trees, and how you can even measure how a baby grows with a math equation. Well, the same thing that's true with flowers, it is true with wealth. Flowers that get watered and fed healthy food, they tend to grow. Those that don't get watered, well, they eventually die. So effectively, when you talk about Black-owned businesses, a lot of Black-owned businesses die. The overwhelming majority of Black-owned businesses end up dying. Why is that? Well, because they don't get watered. If you're spending 40 hours a week building businesses for white people, then you can't spend hardly any time building businesses for Black people. That's like, maybe that's why, I heard a lady that was so mad that she found out her husband had a whole nother family across town. And she was mad about him having another family, right? I thought that she was just kind of mad because he was cheating and it was jealousy. And she said, no, I wasn't so mad that he was just that he was cheating on me. She said, I was mad because he was giving all of his money to this other family, and we were sitting over there struggling and starving and broke. And so effectively, he had, if he had $1,000, $900 would go toward his other family. $100 would go to his family at home. That's what his wife was actually more mad about. I thought that was really interesting. So effectively, Black-owned businesses, we cheat on our businesses. We cheat on our community. We cheat on each other because we spend most of our time, most of our money, most of our resources in other places. I'm not just talking about what you spend your money on. I'm talking about where you give your labor. You get up and you go to work and you work for Google or IBM or something, and you give them your heart and soul, and because they have the capital to afford it. And as a result, their institutions grow and become, trillion-dollar companies. And so the question that must be asked is, well, what happened to your family business? What happens to the businesses in your community? They can't grow if you're giving all your time to something else and then giving your spare time to the Black community or to your own family. You can't treat your family business like it's, the side chick or the side hustle. The side hustle or the side chick, if you want to use that terminology, that gets kind of what's left over after you're done with sort of the main thing. So let's look at the math. Let's just do some quick math here so I can show you in a more direct way how much wealth is being transferred to your oppressor because they convince you that integration was such a wonderful thing. So if you work 40 hours a week, you're basically working 2,000 hours a year. And here's the thing. So that's about 20,000 hours every decade. So if you have 5 kids, those 5 kids are going to give 100,000 hours of labor to somebody else's business if you're training them to simply grow up and work for other people. So basically that one person gives 100,000 hours of work over a 50-year working career. And that's assuming they only work 40 hours a week, which is a big assumption. So if every hour of your time is worth $80 to your employer, right? Because they're not going to pay you the $80, but let's say it's worth $80 to your employer. Well, 100,000 hours times 80 is 8 million. So that's $8 million in a labor donation that's being made to other communities. And that's so it means you have 5 kids, that's $40 million. That doesn't include things like compound interest, which would actually take that number and raise it from 8 million to something ridiculous like 60 million or something like that. Okay. So effectively, when you're trained to when you're trained to give all your labor to someone else, and then you turn around and you give your rent money to the landlord, and then you buy consumer goods from that same economy that's oppressing you or disconnected from you, then you're basically making a massive financial donation to someone else's economic ecosystem. So I remember my wife and I, we went to China during the pandemic, actually right before the pandemic, and we were there for 2 weeks. We went to a bunch of regions in the country, and we noticed that the entrepreneurial culture was very strong in China. They were trying to sell us everything under the sun, and most of these sales were set up in a certain way that I want you to pay attention to. Number one, I noticed that there was a strong entrepreneurial culture in China, but almost none of these people went to college or business school. Most of the people did not go get an MBA to learn how to sell a product and learn how to run a business. It was just a part of their family, part of their culture. The other thing too was they were all deeply connected. So basically what happened was we were the commodity. When we came over there, we were like the fat pig that they were going to slaughter and cut into pieces and feed the whole crew with that one fat American pig, right? Because Americans are rich compared to Chinese people. We have a much higher per capita income. So my wife and I come over there, and I saw the hustle from the very beginning. Every single stop we made on that tour was them taking us to their friend's business. They claimed it was a tourist stop, but I could see right through the BS. In fact, I protested. I said, man, this is crazy. I said, I respect the hustle, but I said, I'm really offended that everywhere I go, somebody's constantly trying to sell me something. And every stop you make with us is basically to somebody's business. And do you know what they told me? They said, because they're very polite. They're very polite when they're the most polite economic gangsters I've ever seen in my life, right? So they very politely said, you don't have to stay and go into every venue, Dr. Watkins, but on your contract in the fine print, it says that if you don't go to every venue, we can take you off the tour. So they were going to put me off the bus because I told them, I said, I'm not getting off this bus no more. Y'all keep taking us to all these places to go shopping. I don't want to shop no more. I'm done. This is not interesting to me, right? But they turned around and told me that in the contract that I had to go to all these different shops. And then so part of me was angry, but the other part of me was like, wow, I'm so impressed right now, right? Because the thing is that places like China understand how hard it is to get resources. Places like China, they have a billion people that know how hard it is to get an education. They know how hard it is to get food. They know how hard it is to get money, even little amounts of money. So they have spent 1,000 years, 2,000 years becoming really good at working together as a group to get the things that they need, right? So effectively, they were like, we got a big, fat, rich American coming into this country. We're going to do everything we can to suck every nickel out of this guy before he gets on that plane to go home. I wasn't mad at that. That was a powernomics move. That they were gang affiliated. They were deeply connected. So effectively, when my wife and I were over there, again, I was a little bit mad that they did things that way. I didn't think it was fair. It kind of pissed me off a little bit. But this is how the economic game is played worldwide. This is how people get wealthy. This is how China became one of the great economic superpowers of this earth. And they're going to pass the United States because they do what B1 people are doing with their children. Their children are learning, advanced economics and advanced engineering at the age of 7, 8, 9, or 10. They're not wasting their time trying to become professional football players or doing TikTok dances. They're sitting around doing artificial intelligence, computer programming, so they can control the year 2050. They're already thinking that far ahead. So if you want to know how to win, I'd say